Boom, you on a cross-country flight, big chilling while you flirting with ATC, because that's what players do. And then right when you reach down to grab your pen so you can write down her number, it falls between the seats. You look up, grab it, and you become disoriented. Here's how to recover from spatial disorientation. Let go. What up, though? Let's talk about what spatial disorientation is, the 8 different types, and how to recover if you ever find yourself in any of these circumstances. Let go. Spatial disorientation is simply the inability to interpret the aircraft's attitude. You have no idea what you're flying. You don't know if you're straight and level, if you're going up, if you're going down, if you're going to the left, if you're going to the right. Obviously, you can see if you have no sense of awareness of this can be exceedingly dangerous. And it can happen to anyone, and it's a variety of different ways spatial disorientation can occur. One of the human body's biggest strengths and traits is its ability to adapt. But when it comes to certain things, and spatial disorientation being one of them, you have to fight the ability to not adapt to certain things because it can make you think you're in a certain place when you're really not there. So you have to fight that. And one of the major keys to fighting that is staying focused on your instruments. If you're starting your pilot journey, one of the first ratings you're going to receive, of course, is the private pilot level. And that is a VFR rating. That is a visual flight rules rating. However, I strongly encourage you, even though it's visual flight rules and you will learn a little bit about, of course, the instruments themselves, I highly encourage you to start relying on the instruments even early on at the private pilot level. Don't wait until you become instrument rated to become even more knowledgeable about instruments or anything of the old more advanced ratings. Do that at the private pilot level. Understand them, rely on them, and most importantly, learn to trust them. Because if you can do that, even in VFR conditions, it can be very beneficial to you. Because if you ever find yourself in any kind of spatial disorientation, visual is not going to help you. Matter of fact, it can actually make things worse. Instruments is what's going to save you. So that's why you always want to focus on your instruments and trust your instruments, even if you're flying VFR. The first type of spatial disorientation is the leans. Lean back. Hey, lean back. And lean back one time. That is simply just you thinking that you're upright, but you're actually turning the aircraft. Obviously, if you think you're in one position, but you're really in another, you can see how dangerous that can be. And it's all about the movement and the fluid in your ears, and you not just trusting the visual, but you're looking at your instruments to try and avoid this. And if it happens to you, immediately correct it. Next up is the Coriolis Illusion. Very similar to the leans, where you're in that constant bank turn long enough and that fluid in the ears can stop moving. The key here is sudden head movements. If you're nice and turning and everything's going nice and smooth and you jerking your head around, you can maybe think that you're on a different plane than what you really are and start focusing on a different axis and have a tendency to either pull back or go forward a little bit too much, and that can cause problems as well. You're not being smooth and consistent, and that can cause a real big problem. Again, the correction is simple for a lot of these. Focus and trust your instruments, never just on the visual aspect of things. As you see, things can get very tricky. Next up is the graveyard spin. And this happens if you inadvertently get into a spin. And let's just say you in the spin for a long period of time before you get out of it. Again, one of the human body's greatest attributes is our ability to adapt. But unfortunately, that can work against you in this situation. So if you've been in the spin for so long, when you finally recover out of the spin, your body and mind still thinks you're in the spin. So it tries to get you back into it because it thinks that that is straight level, that is normal. And you end up going right back into the spin, the graveyard spin. Be aware of that if you've experienced any kind of spatial disorientation, and always trust your instrument. Next up is the graveyard spiral, and this can happen if you're in a turn. So you're starting that turn, but you think that you're descending. So in order to correct for that descent, you pull back and you shorten and tighten that turn. And that can cause problems as well when you're in the aircraft. Trust your instruments. It'll let you know if you're ascending or descending, your instruments, not you visually just trying to predict whether you're doing it or not, because you may not feel the right thing under certain circumstances. The next form of spatial disorientation is somatographic, and that's simply when you put in a lot of power, you may feel as if the airplane is pitching up, or when you take it out that it's pitching down, and you have a tendency to overcorrect. Trust the attitude and understand your instruments on the attitude, whether or not you're going up or down, and not just what it feels like from you pushing in the power or removing the power from the aircraft. Always trust your instruments. That's going to be the common theme to either avoid spatial disorientation or correct and recover from it if it was to happen to you. This is why even if you're flying VFR, even if you're at the private pilot level, learn as much about your instruments as humanly possible and utilize them thoroughly, and most importantly, trust them. Next up is inversion. And inversion can simply be you're just climbing out, but then you correct for straight and level flight, which is perfectly normal, but you do it too quickly. And it makes it feel as if you're topping over and going backwards, so you do it even more. And obviously, that's not a good thing. Always keep your eyes on those instruments to recognize whether or not you're in straight and level or you're still climbing, and don't just trust the way you feel in the aircraft. The next form of spatial disorientation is elevator. And it's just like the name states. Just think about when you ride inside of elevator and it gets ready to take off after you push your floor, and it kind of just jerks up a little bit, kind of gives you a little bit of updraft before it takes off and starts running up. That's exactly what the aircraft is doing. It's responding to that updraft, but if you don't recognize that and you overcorrect and feel like you have to push down and you do it too much, obviously that can be a very bad thing. And you can be in a nice, strong, fast descent. So you don't want to do that, and you want to keep your eyes on those instruments at all times. Next up is false horizon, and it's just what the name states. You have a false sense of where the horizon is. Just think about if you dipping and swinging and banging that thing at night and everything is really dark and dim, and you think the horizon is in a certain position based on where the lights may be, the few lights that are sparkling and shining in the distance, but that's not the horizon. So that's why you always want to pay attention to your instruments to really verify exactly where everything is. When you're flying at all, look at your instruments and then verify with the visual versus the other way around, where you're trying to dictate where the horizon is with the visual and then going to reserve the instruments for last. Instruments first, then get the sight picture in these kind of conditions. And this can help you. Anything just visual by itself isn't going to help you without your instruments. Your instruments can save your life. And the last one on the list is autokinesis. This one here, if you ever remember as a kid, you were told, don't stare at the sun. It can mess up your eyes. Don't stare at the sun. Don't stare at the sun. Something very similar to this in aviation with autokinesis is you don't want to stare at bright lights too long because it can mess up your visual at night. And it can mess up your eyes and have you thinking that you may be in a certain orientation and the plane is in a certain attitude that is not at that attitude. So you kind of want to always be scanning the horizon, but never just staring at anything, just like they told you as a kid, don't stare at the sun, don't stare at the sun, and how it can mess up your vision. That's what autokinesis is all about when it comes to spatial disorientation. Boom, check it. Now that we know the 8 different types of spatial disorientation, let's talk about how to quickly recover from spatial disorientation if you would ever find yourself in any of these circumstances. You want to focus on your instruments. And most importantly, the number one instrument that you want to focus on is the airspeed indicator, not the attitude indicator. And this is all about attitude. This is all about the inability to not know what the attitude the aircraft is in. So you would think to yourself, conventional wisdom, I'm going to first focus immediately on the attitude indicator. The reason why that can cause you even more additional problems is because the attitude indicator is a gyro instrument. And this instrument can have errors, particularly if it exceeds 60 degrees. So depending on how disoriented the aircraft is, it can be tumbling around trying to find itself and trying to find an accurate reading. So while it's doing that, the first thing you can focus on is the airspeed indicator. And that will at least let you know whether or not you're approaching a stall, whether or not you're barreling down at a high speed, and then you can kind of understand where that straight and level is happening with other instruments, whether or not you're ascending, descending, and a variety of other things. But focusing in on that airspeed indicator first can help you regain your orientation and understand exactly what you're doing in the aircraft, and then you can figure the rest out as you go. Don't forget to like this video, comment, and subscribe below. Share this video and subscribe to this channel. I am Donovan Batiste. Hey, this is Leadership Mindset. Big whoa! Subscribe to this channel for more pilot talk, for everything that you need to know for free, for you to become a pilot, for you to stay proficient, for you to pass your biannual, for you to do everything pilot related. Let go! One time.